guys that come in.
Okay.
And then you've got the concrete guys, and then the framers, and then the roofers, and the drywallers, and the painters, and then you got the landscape, and you got the tile, and you got the finish work. Each one of those guys is critical to the job happening, and each one of them has their own, you might say, moment in the spotlight. It doesn't diminish from what the other guy did. They all have to collaborate together.
Eric.
Yes?
What you just described is what I love about the concept of the Confederated Tribes. And how on earth did that mutate to a single church or a synagogue or anything like that? Because it is much bigger than that. It's more complex, more complete, more whatever you want to say. So that film last night really didn't appeal to me a whole lot because I see Hebrew as what you just described, without a central authority among men, but rather from Yah. So just a comment.
When Yahweh first set up the nation, the people, He was the leader. As Jim was saying, He didn't intend for it to be a central human figure of the king. And as we were discussing earlier, when He set up the nation on Mount Sinai, He says, I will be your Elohim and you will be my people. And then the people said, no, we don't want to listen to this voice any longer. In fact, we're going to just die. The voice is too overwhelming. So they said, Moshe, you go talk to him, and then you come back and tell us what he said. That was not his original plan.
Right.
But the people clamored for this human figurehead. They did the exact same thing in desiring a king. And Yahweh said to Samuel, He says, Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. So he takes it as a personal offense when we'd rather listen to a human than listen directly to him. His intention was to speak to the people, and when there's this concept of a kingdom of priests, or perhaps some people say kings and priests. Well, kings and priests is different than a kingdom of priests. Now you get into the meaning of words, and then what is a priest? We can get into that. But to go back to this, to pierce the mind as a tool, like a hook or a nail, this particular concept has a point. And that point, like a knife or a sword, is a tool which is designed to penetrate or stab into. Well, if you go back and you look at the difference between the X and the XY, this is what's known as masculine. Hey, look, there's that pointy hook tool. And this is known as the feminine. And this has to do with a womb. There's other things within those symbolisms. But the point is, that's a play on words, the word zakar also means male or masculine. Because the masculine form is that which pierces, penetrates the feminine to plant the seed. That's what this word means. So the question is, how do we know it's a masculine reference? Because that word means masculine. But it's only translated, remember, commemorate, ceremonial. So when you start looking at the dictionary, you see all these other things. You go, wait a minute, what's going on here? So the idea of saying something about this name acts as a hook or a nail, well, guess what? There's a vav right here in the middle of it. And there's two heys on either side. The word for hey is a witness or a testimony. And he also said a legal matter has to be established by two witnesses. So when I drew that picture the other day where you have the vav and the two heys, well, this almost looks like kind of like wings. Here you have this this figure with these, and it lines up with the letter Samech. These are all pictures of the same notion. It's also a picture of the menorah. You see, just graphically, it's the same elements. We could go on and on about that and go to other places where I'm not going to go at the moment for the sake of staying on a certain track with his name. But what I'm saying is, if these two witnesses are the Torah, remember as we said the other day, this is the hand of the Creator, the Creator's hand, then you could say you should be able to observe nature, sky, water, land, bugs, animals, and see a message in the design of nature about His identity. And then the expression of the Creator was the Torah, so you should be able to read something in the Torah about the identity of the Creator. And this can't contradict this. And then if this is the Vav, man, remember it's number 6, if it's some, whoever it might be, if it's some man who is embodying the words of the Torah, going back to John 1, being the Word made flesh, and that's even each of us. We are supposed to embody and live out the instructions of the Torah as He, the Creator, intended and desired. Then Yeshua said, hey, I'm giving you the Ruach HaKodesh to lead you into the truth. So this hey of that Vav is what it looks like doing works of righteousness, which is the same thing as the Torah telling us what righteousness is supposed to be. So hey equals hey. So the Ruach and the Torah, Ruach is again translated Spirit, Holy Spirit in English is what they use. But anyway, the Holy Spirit and the Bible, the Ruach HaKodesh and the Torah are like the two witnesses validating the testimony of who is the real Messiah, or who is the real man of Yah. Who are the real people that are in His hand, in His grasp. They have to be the people that the way they appear, that's like the Vav, here's the connection, validated by the Torah and the Ruach. And when all these synchronize, we know we're on the right track. So the idea then of asking Jesus into your heart, that Christian concept, goes back to right here. Here's this masculine device which pierces into your innermost parts, and what seed does He plant? He said the word of Elohim was the seed. Yeshua gave parables of the sower about that matter. So to ask for the word, the Torah, to come within you, and then you nurture it to come to life such that it transforms you by the renewing of your mind unto being a new creation. And here's the picture of Yeshua said, I'm the vine and you're the branches. You're supposed to bear fruit. What I'm showing you is that all these motifs and pictures invoking other letters of the alphabet are all wrapped up just in this picture of Yod He Vav He being the masculine device of piercing, penetrating, sticking, and the two testimonies next to the connecting device is the masculine apparatus. That's His name. Which is why I was saying Lou White going to speaking against steeples and trees is a whole other thing. And when you remove the testimonies of Yeshua, saying, He said the Moedim were testimonies. They were witnesses of His identity. When you remove the Moedim and or the Shabbat, you're turning the bull into a steer, to where he can't propagate his identity. But we'll give him golden balls of silver that will stick on the tree and colored Easter eggs there. We'll replace his testimonies. It's like, it doesn't really work. Yes?
Just seeing the way I've never seen it before, an extension of something we discussed the other evening, and I've been saying to people for years, that the Vav, representative of the menorah and all the imagery it has, and where you've got the Ruach and the Torah, You go into the synagogue, and it's all about the Torah. You go into the modern day church, and it's all about the Ruach. And they're both ignoring the other side of that spectrum, where I said the other night in that conversation that the truth is in the middle, the Vod, sandwiched between the two.
Holding the two together is the connector. So Yeshua is not just in the middle, he's the device which holds them together. Now, way back in 2004, I didn't even read Hebrew. A friend of mine got me a Tanakh, which is one reason why I'm encouraging people. You know, the Stone's edition Tanakh is real clear, and there's an advantage of just laying your eyes on the pages and seeing those words. Even though they're modern Hebrew and not Paleo, there's an advantage in looking at Paleo. And even if you hear somebody quoting Hebrew, like this one friend of mine was listening to, even though you don't understand what he's saying, but just like teaching a little baby who doesn't know the language, there's a benefit. Something happens. So in Daniel 12, I didn't read Hebrew at all. I happened to open up, for whatever reason, to Daniel chapter 12. And the archangel Gabriel says to Daniel, hide the words and seal the book. Okay, he told him to do something. That's another part of the study. And then he says, until the time of the end. Until the time of the end? When's the end? End of what? End of the world? End of the age? End of the time of hiding the words and seeing the book? It doesn't say. And I remember thinking, that's so obscure, that's so nebulous, how is anybody supposed to know what in the world he's talking about? And then this thought just dropped into my head somehow, and it said, what if the phrase, until the time, if you look at the spelling of those words, it tells you when that time is. Now why would I have that thought? I don't know. But this is how you spell the word until the time. In modern Hebrew, it was ayin, dalet, and then it was hyphenated to ayin, tav. And this word is translated until, and then it's hyphenated, and I don't know why certain words have hyphens. I don't know if it's a publisher's thing, if it's a Masoretic scribe thing, but this word happens to be hyphenated. And this word is time. And then there's this word spelled kuf zadi, which is translated as end. So it doesn't say until the time of the end. It doesn't say that. It just says, and I'm just showing that this is what Hebrew works, until time end. Well, when I thought, what if the spelling of the word tells you when that time is? It's like something about this word caught my attention because there's this symmetry. They both got an ayin, they're both two-letter words, there's a hyphen that's kind of, what does that even mean? If you turn it into Paleo, just because, that's an ayin, that's a dalet, hyphenated to ayin and a tav. Well, suddenly you see two eyeballs, like binoculars. As a given, as a hypothetical premise, I'm saying that because the tav, remember I said like a note, it's a sign, it's a symbol, like a letter of the alphabet, A, B, C, whatever that might be. It's just a mark that means something. But I'm suggesting to you that the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, composed of 22 marks, are itself the covenant. It describes the terms of relationship between us and Elohim. It also describes who the Messiah is. It also describes who Elohim is. It also describes who we are. And it also describes the way the entire universe was constructed. And it's all by understanding what each one of these little marks mean, which there happens to be 22 of them in the Hebrew alphabet. So there's 22 little marks, which if you understand them, the entire alphabet as a collective becomes its own meaning, which is typically, in modern Hebrew, it looks like this, Aleph, Tav. Paleo, it looks like Aleph, Tav, and I write a little symbol like the Aleph, which is made Tav. There's something about the collection of the alphabet which is itself a sign that means something. Well, what does it mean? The only way to know what it means is to look, to listen, to ponder, to study. This is the letter ayin. If you look that word up in the dictionary, the letter ayin does mean eyeball, but it also means to consider, to look, to balance, to weigh, to measure, to consider really carefully, very exactly. That's the letter ayin. So you can't know what these 22 letters mean unless you know how to read the Torah, because that's the way the Torah is written. It wasn't written in Greek or English, it was written in Hebrew. So the only way to really understand the covenant is by the 22 letters of the Aleph Tav, which is the composition, the notes. The Torah is like a symphony. The notes of the symphony are the 22 letters, repeated over and over in different configurations together. So to ayin the Tav is kind of to comprehend the Torah. But what's this ayin dalet? So the Jews do this, and they've been doing this. The Talmud is apparently, if you had to put a row of books on the bookshelf, it's probably 15 feet long, thousands and thousands of conversations about how to understand this negotiated relationship between Israel and Elohim. And for the Christians to say, stupid Jews and their Talmud, say, wait a minute. The word lamed is the letter lamed, and it literally means teach and learn. Just stick the letter T in front of it. Talmud is simply, these are the things that we have taught and learned, and that we should teach and learn. Past, present, future. Teach and learn. You go to church? Sorry, that's Talmud. You sing a Christian song? That's Talmud. Somebody writes a book of studying some interesting application? That's Talmud. So to knock the notion of Talmud is to not even understand what you're saying, unless you know Hebrew. So for the Jews to keep an eye on the covenant agreement that Yahuwah made with our forefathers, thank you, Yahudah. Now this says understand, and remember, Dalet's a door. Understand the door. Which door? Doesn't say which door. This is hyphenated to that. Until the time. Interesting thing, the word catch-22 was just arbitrarily invented. The guy was writing a book. In fact, as I heard one time, he was going to call it catch something else, and catch 7 or catch 11 or whatever. But somebody else had already used that title, so he changed it to catch-22. What is a catch-22? You got two things, two conditions. You can't have this condition unless you first have that condition. But you can't have that unless you first have this. So you're in quite a jam. You either get both at the same time or you have neither one. You can't even have this really unless you have that to qualify it. But you can't have that unless you have this to qualify that. And so it's like, oh, come on. Well, it's a puzzle. It's a predicament. And it's an interesting predicament because everybody gets it. Somehow the concept of a catch-22 has been stuck in our mind as very curious. Well, wait a minute, this kind of sets up a catch-22. There happens to be 22 letters, but what if this is saying, until the time, Daniel, hide the words and seal the book, until the time that those who have this can only really know they have this when they have this. And those who have this can only really have this when they have that. Well, if that is the Torah as he described it in Hebrew originally, what in the world is ayin dalet? You ever hear the Jews talk about the door? No. Who talks about the door? What's the door? Yeshua claimed to be the door. What? Yeshua being the dalet, the door. So the Jews can't listen. because he's not called Yeshua, he's called Jesus, and he represents doing away with a bunch of the Torah stuff. But why do the Christians not believe the Jews? Because they think the Jews deny the Messiah. So now we have this big chasm where neither the two can ever come together. And if Daniel was told, hide the words and seal the book until the time that the people of Israel will see that the true Mashiach, that is that man who lived 2,000 years, known as Jesus, actually called Yeshua, is actually only correctly identified if you know the 22 letters of the alphabet, the covenant. And the only way to really know you've got the right meaning of the letters of the covenant is that you realize that each one of the 22 letters is Yeshua himself. And therefore, every word he spoke has something to do with telling you what these 22 letters actually mean. Suddenly the catch-22 is fulfilled. But you can only see it if you understand Yeshua is the Mashiach, not necessarily the Jesus Christ figure of the Christian church, and that the 22 letters of the covenant are Yahweh's relationship between himself and his covenant people Israel, not necessarily according to the terms of rabbinical Judaism. This is its own thing. And so that is what we're about. This is what we're studying. And suddenly I realized this is that time. But you can only see that this is that time if you put your eyeballs binocular, two ways of seeing. That Yeshua is identified by the 22 letter terms of the covenant, and the meaning of the 22 letters are only fitly fulfilled and manifest in the life and words of Yeshua as he came and walked them out, which is exactly what you were just describing. He being the Vav, holding together, not just holding together, but actually manifesting properly, pure and clean, what it means to be Ruach and what it means to be Torah, as the Creator built it so. Somebody had their hand up. Somebody wanted to say something? Sorry, I just had to finish the thought. To me, this is incredibly astounding. Because I've never heard this from anybody before. And that means if we play into this rightly, this is the time. Well, what about this word end? Uh-oh, it's the end of the world, the end of the universe. It's all going to explode. The Big Bang is going to turn direction and come back and... Wait a minute. It doesn't tell us the end of what? The end of what? If you look at it in the dictionary, it might mean everything stops, maybe. But if I say this is the end of the table and something comes in, oh, hey, this is the kutz. But if I stick a letter yod in front of this, now that's used in the dictionary, it means wake up. And the letter yod means he will. Who will?
I can't hear you.
Kutz simply means somebody wakes up.
Oh.
Well, who wakes up?
The top switch up here.
If I'm thinking that the Aleph Bet is all the covenant between Israel and Yahuwah, then people in covenant relationship between Yahuwah and themselves are the one the message is about. It's not about the church. It's not about the Jews. It's not about Islam. It's not about pick your favorite group. It's not about that. It's about the people that the alphabetic letters are in reference to. And when Yahweh says, I am your Elohim, I took you out of the land of Egypt, this is Exodus 20, I am Yahweh your Elohim, I took you out of the land of Egypt, then he is speaking very specifically to that group. And anybody who chooses not to identify with that group doesn't need to pay attention. They got some other deal going on. Therefore, when I've heard people say, the new covenant, we don't have to go back and look at these things, we call it an upgrade. That's what somebody said, we call it an upgrade. We got a better deal. Oh, okay, good. You got the iron Dalit. Great. We don't have to iron the top. Okay. Go ahead and study. Go ahead and have fun. Go ahead. Got nothing on me. I choose to set my eyes. Now the other interesting thing, just to show you how Hebrew messes around and plays a little bit, if you put Dalit in Tav, because if you have a mathematical equation, if this is a variable, then you could say this is an ayin regarding the function of Dalit Tav, right? Not that that's minus, but I'm saying, what's the word Dalit Tav? Well, this dictionary is for readers of English. So the Hebrew words are written from left to right, but the format is opening up like an English book. And it starts with the Aleph, so that's like A, and then you go back and you look, there's Bet and the Gimel. And then, oh, I got the letter Hey, so I've gone too far, so I got it back up to the Dalit. And I know that the letter Tav alphabetically is the last letter, so I could look at the last page of the Dalit. I'm trying to show you how to use the dictionary very simply. And one of the last entries says, decree, law, usage, and religion. Dalit Tav Yod, now the Yod is just a suffix, right? Means pious, orthodox, and pertaining to religion. So you could say, wait a minute, I thought orthodox was a bad word. To some people, it's all about relationship, not religion. Well, this is the word translated religion. And pious. We think of pious people as having their nose and they're better than you. That's not what the word really means. Ortho, or an orthopedic bed, if you have a bad back and you go to an orthopedic surgeon, he affects your skeleton. Orthodoxy, that has to do with the teachings. So the word Dalit Tav has to do with taking the teachings and not making them cultural isms or ceremonies that just take on pomp and color, but it's going back to what Yahweh said, which is exactly what Yeshua came to recalibrate for us, to bring us back into the proper structure of appearance and shape and understanding. Everything that Yeshua came here to do is what Dalit Tav means. And so to ayin the Dalit Tav by seeing both the ayin Dalit and the ayin Tav as a catch-22 is the time that we wake up. This picture of waking up, Israel is Yahuwah's sleeping beauty. It's the Snow White story. Disney captured this. Why does those Disney movies ring a bell? Because this bell is embedded in the subconscious of people scattered all across the face of the planet. It's his story embedded within human, you might say the infrastructure of human consciousness is this story. That's why it rings true, which is why when somebody chooses to capitalize on that story, they can make $1 million in the movie theater because something about it resonates. Because that's what he built. And then you realize, well, then it's all about studying the letters of the alphabet, but only, or qualified by, having to do with Yeshua. So any Jew that says, may his name never be mentioned, he's burning in hell forever, that's what they say. They made a little acronym out of the letters Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin, and they'll never mention it. Okay, too bad, you're lost. And for the Christians to say, like we heard there, John Calvin and those various other guys, Martin Luther, who thought that all the Jews ought to be tormented and burned and thrown into hell, it's like blind, asleep, self-induced coma. But if this all of a sudden is the time, then any of us sitting here listening to these videos can choose to capitalize on this moment. We're at this crossroads of time. Never before have we been here.